roaring 20s were known as the golden age of sport, but only for white America. College football was a big city game, played with little color. Another version was small towns and dusty sandlots. They called it postgraduate football until a few ragtag teams banded together in 1920 to form the National Football League. Here, all the white faces were joined by a single black one. His name was Frederick Douglass Pollard, son of a Native American mother and a West Indian father, raised in a German suburb of Chicago where they called him Fritz. He was one of a kind.
He was a pioneer. One of the things he first did was to appear in the Rose Bowl game, the first Rose Bowl game in 1916. He was the first black to make Walter Camp's All-American. He was the first black quarterback in the National Football League. He was the first black coach in the National Football League. Then, outside of his football career, he started the first black tabloid in New York City in 1935. In Chicago, he had the first black investment firm in the United States. And then he became an agent, and he began to represent black entertainers. He achieved so much. It wasn't just football. He was a man on a mission. And I think in his 90-plus years, he attempted and he accomplished so much.
I think I'm a very, very fortunate man, and I'm still able to get around and very thankful that I'm alive enough to be able to have my picture taken and you gentlemen to come and see me.
In 1974, NFL Films visited Fritz. Most of that interview was never used until now.
My father was a great champion boxer in the Civil War days. And he learned the barber trade, and he moved up to a place called Rogers Park, way on the north side of Chicago, a suburb of Chicago.
Rogers Park was all German. My people were the only blacks in the area. They were the only blacks in the schools.
They were Americans, and they were not going to be confined, and they were not going to be marginalized just because their skin happened to be black.
When we went out for the football team down at Lane Tech High School, my brother said, "Say, where's my kid brother? You haven't given him a chance." He said, "Well, I'm not going to play unless you give my kid brother a chance to play." So they gave me, because of my brother, they gave me a chance to play in at 89 pounds on this Lane Tech High School football team.
In 4 years, Fritz gained 60 pounds and a place on the Cook County All-Star team, a first for a young man of color.
There were people in Chicago talk with my mother and tried to get me to go to Brown University.
So it's an interesting kind of history that almost no blacks were ever allowed to go to, quote, white colleges. So the fact that Fritz Pollard did and had done so well is extraordinary.
He would break on the scene against Harvard and Yale. And of course, at that time, it's hard to explain today because these teams are not very powerful anymore. They were college football. Pollard, in effect, ran wild against both of them. It was a revelation that this young black man who was so small could do this. All of a sudden, he went from a very marginal player to one that was getting national recognition.
But his dreams were even bigger.
He was a hero. My father was a hero. When Brown beat Yale, that was all that they needed to write. Pollard beat Yale. They give him anything he wanted. Anything.
One reward was a trip on a cross-country Pullman to play in the first ever Rose Bowl.
Of course, at that time, it was very unusual for any black person, much less a young athlete, to be on a Pullman car. The Pullman porters wouldn't serve Pollard. Some of the hotels wouldn't accept him when they got on the West Coast. So it was more than just football. It was testing, again, the racial barriers that this Rose Bowl game. But it did give him a lot of visibility.
Brown lost to Washington that day, but Fritz Pollard had already earned the greater victory. For the first time, a black man could claim the title All-American. His rise from Rogers Park had been swift. But the biggest challenge lay just ahead.
There wasn't any knowledge of pro football to amount to anything during those days. It was after I finished at Brown and I went down to University of Pennsylvania and I studied dentistry, and they came to me about playing pro football. And that's how I happened to play against Jim Thorpe and some of his Indians. Naturally, I had heard about the great Jim Thorpe and whatnot, but I imagine he had heard about the great Fritz Pollard, because I had a name at that time too.
You know, his mom was a full-blooded Indian. He meets Jim Thorpe on the field, and Thorpe is giving him the once-over, looking at him like, who can this guy be, and what are you doing here?
And Jim said, "Hello, little black boy." I said, "Hello, big black boy." And he looked at me, you know.
And it stunned Jim Thorpe, because no one ever spoke to him that way. And he said, "You're as black as I am." And he said, "And I'm as much Indian as you are."
I said, "Well, we're going to play against each other. We'll find out who's going to be the blackest after this game."
These weren't Ivy League frat boys across the line. The roustabouts of the NFL were out to teach the young black All-American a lesson.
Pro football back in those days was pretty rough. As small as I was, no one had any sympathy for me at all.
No one was pulling for him, all pulling against him. And every game was a challenge, one for survival.
And the word passed around to fellows that we didn't want blacks in pro football, and that's getting.
They used to hit me one on top, one below, in order to try to take me out.
They're trying to break his legs and hurt his arms and all kinds of stuff.
Some of them were a little rough with him, but I didn't think it was the thing to do.
And then when they would do it, they would say, "Well, you little black, I'll get you the next time."
I think he was the most abused of all of them, and he resented it, and he made them pay for it, and I don't blame him. He was good.
I'd look at him and grin. They didn't get mad and want to fight him. Just look at him and get grin, and the next minute run 80 yards for a touchdown.
Pollard in his youth was a little more arrogant than most of them, but I think he had a reason to be.
And I wanted the honor of being the first black coach more than anything else.
Fritz not only held his own, he actually won his enemies over as the player coach of the Akron Pros. Then the coal region of Pennsylvania called.
Those fellows came out of the mines and came up to play football. Never went to college. Never saw the inside of a high school. And I said, "What kind of a little old town is this anyway?" I said, "You know black people around, and you never see any and whatnot." I said, "They're going to give me hell out there."
It was a difficult experience for him because, as he said, they had never seen a black man in the coal region. In fact, the first game he played at Weston Field at Shenandoah, at halftime, because of threats made against him, his team, which was the Gilberton Catamounts, stayed in the middle of the field because they were afraid to get near the fans because somebody might do Fritz Pollard in. But he, like throughout his life, he won respect and admiration of people, even in the coal region.
Fritz left pro football just in time to join the Harlem Renaissance of the 1930s.
The thing about his career in football and even after football was this whole line of achievement. He moved to New York, he went into coal business, and he moved up to the newspaper business, and he went into the entertainment business, and he was just so persistent and tenacious and charming.
The impact of the rights movement from Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta and all that brought forth a revolution, and the fact that Mr. Pollard was a first in a way, in a very quiet revolution. The fact that he was so resilient is extraordinary. And that's what makes him memorable, that he was so resilient.
Sadly, Fritz Pollard's efforts on behalf of African American athletes are just a faded memory. But his story is worth retelling, if only to introduce the players of today to the man who, 80 years ago, carried the ball for all of them.